Well, first of all, thank you very much for the kind invitation to participate here today on this occasion. Well, I was asked, it was said to speak on the R&D institutional evaluation implemented 20 years ago in Portugal. And this is precisely what I will do. So I did not take part on the review team. I didn't have any connections to the team and to this exercise. I didn't have a chance of interacting with Irish higher education institutions or the administration. So I may be kind of an extraterrestrial appearing here among you. I take the risk for that, and it's left to you actually to find out connections and relevance, if any, on what I say to this particular cause. The other thing I would like to mention is that I'll be basically speaking on my own views, no institutional messages. First, because now I am just based at university, so no connections to institutions. But of course, I will be talking to you from experience built mainly of three phases of my life. So 5 years and a half when I was the president of the research funding, public research funding organization in Portugal. We just have one for all areas of knowledge, including social sciences, humanities, and arts, but of course with STEM, health sciences, and all the rest. The second, actually it was before that, I was the first coordinator of this new evaluation exercise decided 20 years ago, but that takes place periodically. And the third point is 6.5 years as president of the Knowledge Society Agency that in Portugal used to coordinate information society and ICT policy across the whole sectors. So somehow it also has a little bit to do with what the previous speaker mentioned. Now, we need a bit of context. It's already a sufficient strain to be talking without being part of the review exercise. And I'm going to have two slides of context, one on the organization of public R&D funding in Portugal, and another one you'll see immediately afterwards. So shortly, we have one public R&D funding organization for all areas of knowledge. It's called the Science and Technology Foundation of the Ministry of Science, Technology and Higher Education. It handles mostly projects, fellowships we mean here PhD and postdoc support, research infrastructures, and, which is not so common elsewhere, institutions. So higher education, not-for-profit research units, either centers, institutes, labs, sometimes research groups. So it's very varied in terms of size and organization. FCT outsources to the National Innovation Agency the program of science and technology-based innovation projects with industry, usually in partnership with higher education institutions and other entities. This agency is actually an enterprise owned by FCT and an agency of the Ministry of Economy for Small and Medium Enterprises. FCT also supervises R&D evaluation of regional program projects, even though the regional component and regional impact component is evaluated by regional schemes. Besides that, in the public sector, the only notable thing we have to take into account is that there exist 5 national laboratories of dedicated ministries. You see them on the slide, but that accounts only for about 8% of overall research funding. So it's quite limited nowadays. It used to be the majority, but throughout the process of around 30 years, it was changed to this, and we adopted a more flexible way of handling research capacity. So on this slide, you see that basically there is one research, public research funding organization, research council, with relations with several things, besides the, relatively small, comparatively small operation of research performing organizations belonging to the state, which are the national laboratories. Now, the other contextual remark has to do with organization models of university research. Well, there are many, there are plenty, so I'm going to simplify a lot in what I'm going to say. But I have to mention that, otherwise probably it is difficult to understand what we try to do, because it's very different from what you find in most of the places. But fortunately, in most of the places you find very different things, so it's just an extra thing different from the others. So if I would like to typify in a small number of models, organizational models of university research, maybe we could say that we have a very clear and extreme model coming out from France, with a national research performing organization close to universities, which is the CNRS. It's a very peculiar form of organization, and there it's in its pure form, let's say. Then you have the German organization, which is extremely different, because it stands quite a lot on top of research excellence organizations, nationally coordinated, like the Max Planck Society, Helmholtz Society, Fraunhofer Society, with different goals and different stages, let's say. But, I would say that the two systems have very little in common in terms of organizational philosophy. In the Nordic countries, also, you can find almost the pure form of the centers of excellence. So you don't worry too much about the system concerning research units and research centers, and you concentrate on a few elected research excellent institutes to have institutional support. The others receive support through the organizations they belong to. Then you have a very peculiar system in the United Kingdom, which is no specific structure. So they are within the university, and they are evaluated periodically with assessments, but strangely enough, the research component assessments are directed to parts of the university departments, so they rate and they fund with that stream of evaluation something that's not the target, the object of the evaluation. It's a funny way of managing things, let me say this way. So because looking at all of that, when we try to develop a scheme of our own, we went in a different course. And our course was actually to think about triggering the development, evaluation, and evolution of centers, institutes, and laboratories related to the higher education system and to not-for-profit research as well, on a way that it is, we call for bottom-up initiative. So there should be, of the initiative of researchers themselves, it should be dynamically adaptable and actually cross the boundaries of the higher education institution. It is like if we put an elastic, flexible academic layer on top of a rather stable higher education institutions' boundaries. And that layer crosses the boundaries and adapts. And well, I can tell you, it reacts quite a lot to evaluation. So before and after an evaluation exercise, these boundaries change a lot. Some institutions disappear, others merge with others, and others cross across institutions and across areas. So this connection we have been talking about of STEM and social science and humanities, for instance, has also to do with these dynamics very much. Well, the Portuguese Research and Development Units Evaluation at a glance, we can say that we had so far 5 national evaluation exercises. The one in 1996 I coordinated, and then you have following ones, 3, 4, sometimes 5 years apart. And there is a next one, so we already had 5, and there is a next one decided for 2017. This is a very differentiated and fragmented program in terms of the kinds of research units. They pop up in all institutions, all higher education institutions in the country, and also on the not-for-profit research sector. There are about 350 research units, plus or minus 10% in recent years. They started with 2070 in 1996, so they grew a bit. All fields of knowledge. The number of research units in 2007, for you to have an idea, is about 50 in exact sciences, about 50 as well in natural sciences, slightly less, but about 40 in the health sciences, engineering and technology close to 70, social sciences 93, arts and humanities close to 80. Well, for each evaluation exercise, we rely on about 25 evaluation panels to have sufficient specificity of analysis. About 200 evaluators, and something that we started in 1996 and have maintained all the time, all from abroad. We don't use Portuguese evaluators in there. Well, maybe Portuguese nationals, but not working in Portugal for quite some time. So these are people coming from abroad. And it involves site visits to the institutions and direct interaction with researchers and PhD students in an engagement process for building up evidence of what they find out. It's not just paperwork or any other sort of observation. Research units at the end are rated excellent, very good, good, fair, and poor. And another peculiarity of the program is that from the evaluation, you derive funding for the excellent, very good, and good research units. The fair and poor don't receive, of course, support. And this funding is divided in 2 chunks: core funding and strategic funding. A research center or unit may not receive strategic funding. So it is awarded on the basis of kind of a proposed budget allocation of the evaluation panels themselves. So we use the peers coming to evaluate, to make the proposals on the assignment of strategic funding for this institutional organization. Well, the scope of my remarks on these evaluation exercises is based on all the evaluation exercises except the one of 2013. You know, even in Portugal, life is not perfect. So the 2013 evaluation had very different principles and procedures of all others. And it had as one of the explicit goals to discontinue support to half of the research units. Well, it came also in austerity times, but it's not only that. So it's the idea that people in charge didn't adopt the idea of sustaining the system as a way of organizing overall the research triggering the organizational effort of the research centers and institutes across the board. And they began being contaminated by the centers of excellence model, which could be adopted, but it's not the case. Well, what happened, of course, as you would imagine, it received wide criticism by the research community, many appeals in the, as the law allows for and regulations allows for this sort of exercise, but also something very unusual in this sort of thing. It never happened before. The process was challenged in court by several institutions. What happened is that the present government decided to reinstate the principles and procedures of former evaluations, well, with incremental improvement as it happened throughout time, and anticipated the next evaluation exercise to 2017 for damage control. So the situation is so serious as that. And well, you probably imagine that I myself was a very strong critic of the whole process. So I'm very happy that the path is being corrected. So if you want to know about 2013 evaluation, you have to look for it on your own. Now, let's go for the description shortly. So let me stress that science, so what I had in the previous slide is what is the essence of science. Let's not forget it is ideas to formulate and answer questions. Many, but how does it function? What can it do? What is it for the different sorts of questions that can be asked in science? People. And another ingredient that we need on this sort of discussion is to understand that there was a process of the invention of the method of invention that began actually managing the research production system. So this sentence, of course, is of Alfred North Whitehead. It's well known, I guess. So it appeared in universities like Berlin, Cambridge, Johns Hopkins, in the dye industry, BASF, well, I don't, what led to Ust, I leave to Andrea to, to pronounce this difficult word, but it's nice what it means because it's very informative. Bayer and Agfa, and then it was followed by electricity. But, well, the main examples are Mellon Park of Edison General Electric Company. So, and interestingly enough, this happened more or less at the same time, at the end of 19th century. So we can see on this idea of actually managing the research effort and thinking of it institutionally, three ingredients. Institutions, I cannot think of anything better than Cavendish. Instruments and knowledge networks. And also the idea of agencies to fund research and development by contracts. This is the main contribution is American, and the war effort is certainly the most prominent and visible effort that actually set the pace to other countries afterwards. But the idea, so the American invention, is that it is to be done with university scientists, with universities, with scientists' ideas, and based on peer evaluation. And on the table, you find the board, which was shared by Vannevar Bush, and you can see that the members are himself, so president of Carnegie Institution, former and professor of MIT, president of Harvard University, president of MIT, president of National Academy of Sciences and of Bell Labs, commissioner for patents, a professor of Caltech, a general of the Army, and an admiral of the Navy. So you see what the approach was, and instead of developing a national laboratory to accomplish whatever was desirable in terms of for effort, they found out that it was better to run calls for proposals and have the people working at frontiers of knowledge making the proposals instead of savant trying committee work to try to find priorities. Now, in terms of the principles of institutional R&D evaluation we adopted, is evaluation to foster excellence and impact, not to ensure conformity or minimal quality standards. This is a very important point, especially because, and now let me carry on my views here with particular strength, evaluation for conformity of minimal or minimal quality standards, I think it's absolute nonsense for research or higher education. And unfortunately, we are seeing a fashion in several European countries of adopting higher education quality assurance and professor researchers' performance evaluation systems that have serious misconceptions and are counterproductive from my point of view in terms of making the system develop creatively instead of conformally and restricting new avenues and innovation for the future. Well, the other important point is priority to human resources, so talent attraction and development of postgraduate training in the research centers and the institutes. The evaluation units, as I already mentioned, should be of the researchers' initiative, so it's a trigger to a bottom-up process. They are self-organized units. A research unit must have its own identity around the sound conceptual project of researchers working at the frontiers of knowledge. And the call for proposal is opened before each evaluation exercise to allow for readjustments of the network. Well, no need to emphasize that it is useless to evaluate institutions of this kind if the researchers are not allowed to self-organize, and if you think of a rigid institutional framework. Now, the other point is that it's a collegial judgment by peers, not a simple result of numerical indicators. These are used just to inform the evaluators, but the evaluators are free to recommend what they think collectively. Not even the application of formulas to partial scores by the evaluators. And the collegial decisions, because the collegial decisions of experienced and independent scientists competent at the frontiers of knowledge of the field are found by us as far superior to a spreadsheet. So research evaluation is complex, and all of us know there is no one who has a good quantitative model for it. It's far from it, actually. So the evaluation panels are made of experts of each research area, and there is a direct interaction of evaluators with the evaluated, well, for several reasons. To gather additional information, to contribute to transparency, understanding, and credibility of results. Sometimes people think that's just a matter of ranking and deciding budget allocation. But if the system is not credible by rank and file, it's completely useless. So the ultimate objective is not to rank the evaluated, but to foster excellence and impact of future research. Evaluators from abroad, for several reasons as well. So one of them is independence. Portugal is bigger than Ireland, but it's a small country in a sense. And so one of the reasons of independence in a country of this size actually cannot be solved inside our borders. So like Blaise Pascal said, it's not allowed the fairest man in the world to be the judge in this case. I believe he said that in French, but anyway. Well, the evaluation should have as reference the best international practices, so it's a very simple way of contributing to that. It's a very clear and simple statement of an internationalization policy, so the message is clear, conveyed to the research system and to the university system. It contributes a lot to international visibility of competencies for increased connectivity with the best international research networks. So these evaluators, these hundreds of evaluators we have used, are very effective ambassadors and gatekeepers of connections that for the years have contributed a lot to us. It by itself, it enhances international credibility and recognition of evaluation results, and it contributes to improve detection. It's a very important thing, detection of emergent competencies irrespective of PET hierarchies that exist in the institutions, and of new opportunities of scientific leadership. Of course, it also detects the obsolete part of that. So somehow it's a very nice instrument to accelerate change and to tap on new opportunities of leadership, which of course is more important when you have a rapidly changing research community period. Well, very few evaluation criteria, 3 or 4. For example, productivity, training, relevance, feasibility, described extensively. So there are sentences describing what is meant to do on each one of these particular criteria. What are the main evaluation items to be considered? Well, you imagine that, of course, it includes contributions to innovation, science and technology policy, and society, societal challenges, culture, arts, and so on. But it is done as a description and not breakdown on items to be rated, to leave room for the interpretation and application by the evaluation panel finds appropriate to the particular area. Well, we asked the evaluators to grade to grade the criteria. Well, not many levels, but 5 levels. Not to have numbers to compute a final grade, but to be sure that they paid attention to each one of particular criteria. Well, and then finally, the idea that we always seek precedence of originality, quality, and content of research over quantity. Quantitative indicators like publication counts, impact factors, and so on in this system should not drive evaluation decisions. So decisions actually are driven by the collegial opinion of the evaluation panels. Well, I cited a very good report that I don't lose any occasion to publicize from DFG, the German Research Council, proposals for safeguarding good scientific practice, revised in 2013, that states criteria that primarily measure quantity creates incentives for mass production and are therefore likely to be inimical of high-quality science and scholarship. So I think this is very, very clear and very difficult to argue against. And at the end, we have full open publication of evaluation reports and recommendations. Well, that puts some strain on the evaluation process because it requires substantive evaluation panel reports that, of course, the organization has to assure are produced by the evaluation panels regarding its research unit. Well, so they have to be sufficiently extensive and informative to justify and explain the evaluation result in a way it is comprehensible for both the organization, the funding organization, but also for the evaluated. And it should include the recommendations regarding the future, benefiting from it being seen from people from the outside. It includes full lists with the names of members of the evaluation panels. They can consult referees. These are not publicized, but the evaluation panels, the ones who take responsibility of what they are doing, they have a face and name. It also includes comments on the evaluation panel reports that are requested to all research units. Those who want to contribute then can see their reaction to the evaluation reports next to the evaluation reports in the same publication. Well, this is a way that also contributes substantially to what we think as institutional building in research management in the universities. So it actually fosters the evolution of organizational forms from individual research project teams to centers and institutes to a strategic organization of R&D with strategic research labs, which in Portugal we call associated labs, but also some of the centers have this profile, and to a pool of human and information resources across the board organized as open networks. Well, to finalize, I will just show a few figures stating this. Portugal, as you know, was a latecomer to science and went through a very rapid phase transition in science and technology capacity. Well, with a recognized important contribution in Portugal of the National Research and Development Units Evaluation process. So it is identified as one of the contributors for that. Well, what happened in terms of change, of course, it cannot be all attributed to this evaluation process because it's a systemic thing. But anyway, what happened can be seen here and in the several other slides. Let me explain a little bit the slides. So the slides are for a particular year, well, figures of different sorts for the several European countries. And for Portugal, there appear several values in different years. So one of them is comparable to the benchmarking. The other is to show jumping on the scale. So this one has to do with researchers per thousand labor force. What happened from 1995 to 2011, it was multiplied almost by 4, but it went through the whole spectrum. So we started tailing European Union 15 countries, so below all of them, in terms of the size of the research workforce, and we ended just following the 3 Nordic countries. Well, the green bars are not European Union, but they are there for comparison. United States, Korea, Norway, Japan. Well, you can recognize OECD data, of course. So from the point of view of the size of the research community, it is an enormous jump. The growth of researchers, when you look at that benchmarked across Europe, well, is quite different from the comparison. These people, in terms of producing publications, also you see an enormous jump. Again, the same pattern, so lagging behind almost anything. This is publications per million population, and then jumping, well, to the middle. Well, of course, it lags a little bit on the research capacity drive, so it probably, yeah, I will be finishing. It probably will, will still grow. And in terms of R&D by performing sector, the evolution was this one. This is constant prices. The only reason I have this slide is to show something I never mentioned before in my presentation, which is the part of the business sector. So this effort, it's not only based on the two bottom items, so higher education, not for-profit institutions, with the narrowing importance of the state institutions, which is the yellow part, but also it was also accompanied by an increase in business, with the 2009 crisis very clear. And regarding this aspect, so in Portugal we have observed the high export and gross value-added capacity of enterprises with the highest R&D expense, which can be summarized in this slide. The 100 enterprises with the highest intramural R&D expenses in 2008 accounted for a joint R&D expense of 3/4 of the total R&D expense. So among more than 2,000 enterprises declaring expenses and more than 10,000 surveyed, an employment of more than 6,000 researchers, exports of more, so these are the important figures, exports of more than 1/4 of all national exports, 4 times the national exports growth from 2007 to 2008, and 10 times the national gross value added growth from in that year. And I guess that's it. Yeah, thank you very much.